Welcome back, everybody. This Week in America, website thisweekinamerica.us. Thank you for joining us on the program. As mentioned, our special guest tonight coming to us from Australia, RossFardon is a Queenslander educated at the University of Queensland with a doctorate from Harvard. He trained for the Methodist ministry, but he says he gave up religion for better beliefs. We'll talk about that on tonight's program. He had his best company experience, he says, in Western Mining Corporation, was in charge of world mineral exploration for BHP and for MIM Holdings, Director General of Mines and Energy in South Australia, CEO or chairman of two new tech companies, chairman of the Commonwealth Cooperative Research Centre, a consultant to business and governments, worked in 14 countries, set a number of world exploration strategies. He's written and lectured widely. He's a fellow of the Academy of Technological Services and Engineering, and the list goes on and on. He knows what he's talking about. He's considered one of the top experts on mining in Australia, and he's with us on This Week in America. Ross, welcome to the program. It's great to have you with us.
Well, thank you, Rick. It's a long list, but there are a lot of people who've done more than I have.
Well, you've done so much, and I thought it was important to mention some of those to set the context for what we're going to be talking about in the program. And it's basically a series of books, a project of books that you've put together. 4 books, 23 essays, and they're growing. They're available at the website RossFardonBooksAndEssays.com. We'll give you that throughout the program and have it available at the website. And this is a project that I understand when you were in your 40s, even 50s, you thought about writing, but you just didn't feel the time was right for you. Talk about why now you feel like it's important to write these books.
Rick, a lot changed in my life when I was a little 15-year-old way out in the bush in Australia. Someone gave us a big volume on the wisdom of India. And I can tell you that the Bhagavad Gita and the Epic of Rama were very different from the boyhood adventure stories I loved. And I set myself to read the world's great literature, but by my middle years, I was highly disappointed with the academic tradition in Australia and the world of so-called great writers, and realised that practical people had a different take on things. But I wrote a lot, about 1,000 pages in my 40s and 50s, and thankfully I burnt a lot because it was too critical, too negative, and I needed another 20 years to put together a positive affirming view of this world, which is a pretty wonderful place. Rewrote everything and started again in my 70s. And now at 77, it's a weird thing to publish 4 books and 23 essays at once. I can't wait around at my age.
Well, it's interesting because the books are available, and you publish these books yourselves because a lot of publishers say, wow, we don't do all of that at once. And really, the books are so meaningful and they're out there, and it's really important, isn't it, to get this word out to people?
It is. Well, obviously I'm publishing because I think so, and this is my legacy of a lifetime, and people in our generation, Rick, especially in Australia and America, we're the most fortunate generation that ever lived. I've had a golden and wonderful and rich and crazy life in many ways, and this is a legacy. But I did publish them through Ex Libris, which is a Penguin self-publishing arm, because I wanted wider reach than just me self-publishing here in Australia.
Yes, and they're available worldwide. And again, I'll give you that website. It's Ross, R-O-S-S, Fardon, F-A-R-D-O-N, booksandessays.com. If you go to our website, thisweekinamerica.us, you can link on directly to Ross's website and get the information. No one, to my knowledge, has ever taken on such a broad spectrum of topics in a series of books before. You talk religion, philosophy, science, history, ethics, and management. And you say it was really important. Most people would say, geez, focus on one at a time, handle one topic at a time. You really feel it's important for all of us to do everything better, and this is a key to being able to accomplish that.
Rick, you can take it as great arrogance, or on the other hand, you can take it as I do, as my legacy. And I'm not just as a self-publisher, publishing every idea I had last Friday. Every sentence in these books withstands 1 to 7 decades of study and world experience, and every sentence is topical, and every sentence is proved to work from little people to middle to big people over 4 or 5 generations. When you're my age, you've gone through half a dozen world business cycles and so on. And really, it started out as an outcry against a lot of what's published by academia, but realised it's no use being against everything. What are we for? And practical persons, as one of those people out there putting into of the millions and millions who make our societies worth living in, I thought it's worthwhile just publishing less than half of what I've written, but it's the half that's proved to work. And I think there's a great slogan in publishing in America, all the news that's fit to print. Well, I laugh that this is all my views that are fit to print.
You know, it's interesting because this is not just a theory, philosophy that Ross has. These are really based on firsthand experiences of over 70 years. This really is taken from what you've experienced. And as I mentioned in the beginning, you've really been in some interesting places and dealt with some of the best minds in the world and some of the best technology in the world.
It's an interesting life. In my professional life, which is really a quarter of a person's real life, though a marvellous quarter, I changed jobs far too much because mineral exploration is a very cyclical profession and so on. So I had to compare and contrast of being out of work and then finding wonderful jobs, working in 14 countries and comparing countries and peoples and philosophies and government. But the most important thing in my life is comparing indigenous and very poor peasants. We slog up and down the creeks in the mud or out in deserts with these people who've never had a chance in the world, and then fly back to our glossy towers in our own countries or in foreign countries and interview ministers and the elites of our society. And it took me till my 70s really to realise how much I'd learnt from the poor people and so on compared with the elites. And I'm not one of those people who believes that all wisdom comes from the highly educated people. It brings home, if you're not educated, you've got to use your brains and your common humanity. And the beautiful and marvellous common humanity from being brought up with an old Aboriginal man when I was a little kid, through to working with indigenous people in the world. All this compare and contrast is something wonderful, and I think it's worth writing about.
Let's talk about some of the books, in particular, Science, Christianity, and the Will to Good. Talk about this book. It's getting excellent reviews out there. It's getting people to think. And I'm sure for any author, if somebody says, I really had to reflect on what you said, that I really had to set the book down for a few minutes and really ponder what you'd said, that's a great compliment. Talk about what's in the book and why this is important.
Look, it's amazing. It's interesting that when you see the book, the biggest words on the cover are the will to good. But scientists, I find, and I've moved amongst them all my life in new technology and so on, don't think enough about what science has done for our world. It really is reality. It's self-correcting reality. Science is not always right, but it's self-correcting. But it really is 150 years since the bases of all the world's religions has been really blown out of the water. And I've spent all my life amongst the most beautiful Christians. And to become an atheist, in other words, I don't believe in gods, but I believe in many other things very powerfully. And I'm writing my book to stress the natural of belief. Just the need to have shelter and to release from pain and release from oppression and have security for our children and grandchildren. What drives peasants and poor people throughout history gives you a marvellous natural ethic for all people. And I don't pick up a paper or listen to the news any day without people crying out for a realistic ethic that breaks across all belief. And I say it's my gardening book for life. How can we lead effective, joyful, beautiful, and kind lives when so much of what people believe, I believe, frankly, is twaddle? And when you go to plant a garden, and all my family are gardeners, you have to weed heavily. You can't just knock the tops off the weeds. You have to take the roots out too to make a garden. And I'm very critical of the world's religions, at the same time honouring the marvellous people who believe those things. They joke there's no being as strange as the human being, and people believe all sorts of strange things and still turn out to be wonderful human beings. And we must affirm all these things that are wonderful and know why.
You're listening to This Week in America, our website, thisweekinamerica.us. Our guest on the program, Ross Fardon. His website is RossFardon, and that's RossFardon. Fardon is Fardon, booksandessays.com. Information there on his 4 books, on his 23 essays. You can link on directly by going to our website, again, thisweekinamerica.us. And that message, Will to Good, that you have, it's a very positive message, isn't it?
It's more than positive. It's transforming, Rick. And from the way we go about housework to looking after our children to friendships and business and politics and so on, the great religions have preached the golden rule, do unto others as you would. Jesus said, love one another. And the Muslims said that life depends on learning and justice and prayer and valor. But the will to good just says, and this applies from wartime to soldiers to terrible tragedies to Africa to everywhere, whatever situation we're in, all decent human beings just make it better. And the will to good is a practical thing every moment of every day. It's a deeply spiritual thing in that it sustains us from the time we're little kids to counselling all those people at my age. A lot of people who are dying, and thankfully most of them are doing it nobly. But the will to good pervades everything, and we have a lot of Holocaust victims in Melbourne, and to speak to those people can be transforming. You in America, about your survivors of tornadoes and so on. The will to good just takes good times and makes them beautiful, takes bad times and makes them better, and it takes looking out the window and seeing a beautiful world and makes that better too.
We're talking about a series of books from RossFardon. We're talking about the 4 books, also the 23 essays, and we'll have Ross back on another program to talk in depth about the essays. In the books we mentioned Science, Christianity, and the Will to Good. 2 other books are the Blue Book of Leadership and Management and the Blue Book of Belief, Leadership and Management in the public service area. These are important books because you feel very strongly about management and how we need to go about that. Tell me why these books were so important for you to write.
It's intriguing, Rick, and to your listeners who've read on ethics from Aristotle right through to the moderns. There's a great academic world of ethics, but as a practical man, we've got to include in ethics a dedication to good management and so on. The greatest salvation in this world has been science, technology, and mercantilism, which has brought extra wealth and good management. And we have to praise these things, and people can criticize them, of course, because they get out of hand. But you might say they're the worst except for all others, but they've transformed the world, and they can transform poor people, rich people, as I say, soldiers and charity workers and so on. There's a lot of terrible management even amongst the people of goodwill. And we have to include, if we say we're living a rich life on this earth or an effective life, we have to include good management. And really my good management books are my primary books of philosophy, because the way they approach management is a joy and a success in good times and is perseverance in bad times, but it's immensely satisfying.
Information on all the books available at Ross's website, RossFardon, booksandessays.com. That's Fardon. And the 4th book, This Could Be Your Future, that's the autobiography. And you said this was really important for you to write, wasn't it?
Some notable people in Australia have said that as a person who spent his life in new technology and mining, I should just write about my business life and so on. But from the time I was a little child in a beautiful, rich but very poor area of Australia, I've loved the natural world, and up to the age of 10, brought up to revere this marvellous Aboriginal elder, the last of his tribe. And those things mean the world to me, and I felt it's essential for a practical man to write of my love of this natural world, the absolute beauty and love and goodness I found amongst indigenous people. And there's a lot of terrible things in the indigenous world, as we all know. But someone's got to sing a song of how good all these things can be. And so it's very funny that readers are responding mostly now to my descriptions of the love of the natural world and of indigenous people.
The books are called, the project is called the RossFardon Books and Essays. That's the website where all the information is for you to gather on the books. The 4 books, the 23 plus essays, and we'll be talking about the essays on a later program. Several things that you write about. The threat of indifference and the acceptance of mediocrity. Indifference and mediocrity. These are words that alarm you, don't they?
I'm not the only one to say that the thing that stands mainly between a good life for people in all the world and a pretty dreadful life is indifference, if good people are indifferent. Now, there's frustration just busting out of all the pores of people in Australia and America and Europe and, of course, Africa and the Middle East, for God's sake. And what are we going to do about it? And there's just a pervading need not to accept mediocrity and tragedy. And the world's management schools are built around teaching people a few extra specialties, teaching financial management and a few other good things. I've been sending people for 3 generations now. All my friends have been sending people to these courses, and they are aimed to make things just a little bit better. And the consulting world is based on not shaking the tree too much, but just doing what the company hired you to do and leaving the CEO of the company unchanged. Don't shake that tree. Every now and then someone's got to write about if we shake the tree, we can make nearly every organisation at least a third better, and some can be transformed so that they're unrecognisably better. And it's the acceptance of mediocrity, despite teaching a lot of good things at Harvard and Stanford business schools, and I know umpteen people who've been there. And my book says every now and then we have to stand back and not accept mediocrity, and this is the way to achieve excellence.
You know, a big part of your life is evolution. Your ideas and thoughts have changed. You said that even 20, 30 years ago, you thought you could probably put down on paper your interpretation of some of the topics that we're talking about. You just didn't feel you were at that place yet. Talk about evolution, and is that something that some of us resist? If we feel this way in our 30s, and we think we have to feel this way for the rest of our lives?
It's the evolution towards freedom. You know, lack of ideology, and in my case, and I think for many people, lack of faith, which is a religious ideology where you believe things because you want to believe. But the loveliest thing about human beings, from a little child till the day we die, is curiosity, and just learning everything that's wonderful in the world and leaving yourself open to the wonder of people and the natural world and so on. And the best honesty, treating everything on its merits and going with truth, not going with something because my father taught it or my society believes it, and how hard it is for anyone to break out of many of the closed societies on earth. But really, I'm writing about freedom, and freedom from bad management, freedom from ignorance, freedom from closed minds. It just opens up a world which is wonderful beyond belief, and it teaches us so much that's disastrously god-awful in the world. So there's management books to say what we do about that.
You know, another word that comes up often is ethics, and we've talked about that. And you said that people are crying out for an ethic that applies to all beliefs and cultures. How strong is that in us, that we really need to have some answers?
It's an amazing thing that it seems to be so obvious that there's a little bit of a surplus of goodness in people. You know, we know that we're good, bad, and indifferent, but it had to be rediscovered after the hegemony in the West of religious belief, which said that there is no good in us. That's in countless liturgies and so on, unless we are saved in the Christian sense. But discovery of the world in the 1500s and 1600s showed that there were countless other people doing as well as Christians. And the Enlightenment, they went crazy with Rousseau and so on, noble savage. But nevertheless, they discovered that there were quite wonderful people around the world and common heritage of good. And I think we've got 500 years of knowing now that inherently, across all beliefs, there is so much goodness in humans if we give it a chance. Now, I know damn well how much evil there is in the world too. It breaks you up, and I've been broken up all through my life by reading of the evil of humanity. But good does predominate a little if given a chance, and over centuries a slight predominance of good has made all the privilege of people like you and me and our listeners in our Western world. And we have to stand up for good, and we have to be careful how we define it. And ethics is just the common heritage of mankind, that we go out and make sure there's a surplus of good in everything we do.
It's a very thought-provoking series. We're talking about the books written by RossFardon, our guest on the program, along with essays, 20-plus essays, 23 currently. RossFardon Books and Essays is the website. That's RossFardon Fardon, RossFardon Books and Essays.com, the website. Link on our website, thisweekinamerica.us, and that will take you directly to Ross's website. Ross, it's been a pleasure to have you in the program. I mentioned we'll have you back to talk about the essays, and we look forward to continuing the discussion. Thank you for being with us.
Rick and your listeners, thanks for persevering with an Australian.
It was great having you on the program. Again, very thought-provoking. It's RossFardon Books and Essays for all the information. Ross will be back with us on a future broadcast of This Week in America. Website thisweekinamerica.us.